Hello everyone, this is Helios Raven. I tell you how you do it, even if you don't care. And we're continuing our in-depth look into the forces of Tau and Battlefleet Gothic with the allies and mercenaries with the Tau, and we just went over the Dohaus and escorts. Now we're going to look at the Kroot War Sphere. Of course, what are Tau without Kroot? So, they do have a Kroot model, which is the War Sphere. It's a defensive unit with 10 hit points, speed 10 centimeters, turn special, 2 shields, armor 5, turrets 3. And it has a weapon battery system, range 30 centimeters, firepower 12, all around. And so basically this thing is pretty much a powerhouse when it comes to broadsiding, and if you have it next to a messenger, then look out, vessels that think they have an advantage of being far away from the thing. It's pretty nice. And when it comes to that, regards. And the Kroot War Sphere, when against boarding, has a boarding strength of 20. This is the vessel you want to board with, because it is ridiculous what its strength is already before dice rolls. It is really hard to beat the Kroot in a battle of boarding actions. And in planetary assaults, it contributes 3 points for each turn it is actually landed on the target planet, and contributes nothing for being within 30 centimeters. So if it lands on the planet, it will contribute 3 points for each turn it has actually landed, which is really, really nice. Movement-wise, it's kind of like the Orc Rocks. Every turn it moves in a straight line up to 10 centimeters, no more, no less. War spheres may not turn or use burn retros or come to a new heading. And on all ahead full orders, a war sphere moves an extra 2d6 centimeters in any direction at the end of their move. If this causes them to move 10 centimeters or more in the different direction to the one they are traveling in, this becomes their new direction to travel. This can be seen basically, so if it moves 10 centimeters up, then can do an all-ahead full. If the all-ahead full order is 10 centimeters or more, the new direction that the Kroot War Sphere goes in is the new direction that it travels in the next round. If the all-ahead full roll is under 10 centimeters, it moves in the direction of the turn, and then continues going in the direction it was previously in the following round. And due to their low speed and considerable momentum, war spheres, which are crippled or moving through blast markers, do not reduce their speed. War spheres and gravity wells of a planet or moon may make a free turn like ordinary ships up to 45 degrees, and or place themselves in a stationary or low orbit. On critical hits, they lack the complex systems of true spacecraft, so critical hits are not rolled on the critical table. Instead, each critical hit inflicts +1 points of damage. And if the war sphere is reduced to 0 hit points, you do not roll on the catastrophic damage. Instead, you remove the war sphere from play and place 4 blast markers. And that was it for the Kroot War Sphere. Now, there's a group of aliens that the Tau can have called the Demerg. I could be pronouncing that wrong, forgive me. And the Demerg have a special series of rules. The first is blast markers. Because of the way that their shields are arranged and how they work, they are not affected by blast markers on their movement. They have no effect on the blast marker. They have no effect on the movement of the ship. Instead, each blast marker that you move over, you remove from the game, and you place on like a chart or next to the ship, hovering above it. Now, so say if you cross 5 blast markers, you've picked up 5 blast markers at that point. Now, the player controlling the ship cannot control this. He or she has to pick up every blast marker that the ship passes over. And this will be explained later as to why. And there's no way for them to leave any in place. In terms of celestial phenomena, they are unaffected by solar flares, gas and dust clouds, and radiation bursts. Do not place blast markers in contact with them for celestial phenomena of any kind. In deployments and scenarios, aside from the Tau, who appear to have the strongest known connection with them, they can work with other fleets. Any fleet except the Orcs, Tyranids, and Necrons can use Demurg Bastion-class vessels. They are purchased as cruisers, but do not contribute to the number of ships required to gain access to battleships, grand cruisers, etc. They can never carry fleet commanders or use fleet commander rerolls or be placed in squadrons with non-Demurg vessels. Tau fleets and other races whose fleet list specifically include the Demurg ignore these restrictions and should instead select Demurg vessels using the entries given in their fleet lists. In terms of mercenary roles, they do have the mercenary rule, which is, unless the fleet is entirely composed of Demurg ships, they are considered to be mercenaries, and will not continue to fight if crippled. Crippled Demurg ships will attempt to disengage every turn and run for the nearest point on the nearest table edge if they fail. However, if they are part of a fleet fighting against orcs, it will only disengage if first reduced to only having 1 or 2 damage points. And then they were given special rules for their weapons. They follow all the same plain rules with the following exceptions. Their cutting beam. The cutting beam is a short-range but devastating isolation beam used mostly to mine out rock and such. And the cutting beam counts as a single lance, but each blast marker picked up by the Bastion in the movement phase gains the beam the equivalent of 1 extra lance shot, up to a max of 8, which is really, really nice. And you cannot hold any extra blast markers every other turn. So say if you fire the cutting beam and you have 10, the extra 2 are lost after the beam is fired. You can't keep any of them. In terms of launch bays, their launch bays have a special configuration where, when noted on the listing, some of their launch bays may also fire torpedoes. Now, the launch bays can't fire fighters or bombers and torpedoes at the same time. It can only launch fighters, bombers, or torpedoes. Now, this doesn't mean that their launch bays all get to fire torpedoes and that all their torpedoes get launch bays. No. The torpedo tubes on these vessels can only fire torpedoes, and the launch bays can only launch attack craft and launch bombers, and may only launch torpedoes if noted in their stats, which is pretty cool. That basically means that even though they may not have torpedo launch tubes, they may get torpedoes in their launch bays, which, again, just want to note, they can only fire one or the other. They can't fire their torpedoes and their attack craft in the same turn. They can only fire one or the other. And that's it for their special rules. We'll continue the in-depth look of the actual vehicles in another video, and so until then, this is Helios Raven, signing off.